Just to set a bit of context for this panel, what Piers has tried to do whenever he's kind of like touring around different countries with the Ideas Salon is that he always tries to kind of like look at the host city and actually explore what good ideas are kind of like going on in that city. So he's done New York, he's been over in Asia. So what we're going to be discussing over the next 30 to 40 minutes is just exploring what good ideas are currently coming out of London, and also raising the question of whether there is, you know, what some people have termed a creative renaissance going on within the capital. Just to set a little bit of a context to this discussion, if you imagine back in 1997, London was very much regarded as like the creative epicentre of the world. There's the infamous cover of Vanity Fair, there's Noel Gallagher and Patsy Kensit sprawled out over a bed. You know, Cool Britannia, that was all the kind of monkey that was going on. You had Britpop, Tony Blair was in power. And then, you know, also at the same time, East London was getting regenerated, the Truman Brewery, creative workspaces were emerging, and somehow London was at the real kind of like centre of the world in terms of creativity, good ideas. Then it seemed to kind of go flat for a little bit. And the reason, you know, just continuing on from the conversation that Piers and I were having, is that in my previous job I was quite fortunate to be able to live and work in different countries, such as in Amsterdam, New York and Tokyo. So I'd been away for a period of time, come back to London after 3 or 4 years away travelling, and it somehow felt that there was like this renewed energy again, basically. So I started trying to look for empirical evidence about this, whether this was right or wrong. Fast Company actually noted London as Global City of the World last year. There's also Foreign Policy magazine also noted London as the cultural centre of the world last year as well. And still titles such as Vogue like document about, you know, streets in E2 being, you know, the kind of like spots to go. So just wanted to kind of open it up to my esteemed panellists. So what do you guys feel that there's a creative renaissance? Do you feel that London is getting good again at the moment? I'll start off with you, Matt.
Okay, yeah, that's definitely working. I agree. I think there is a creative renaissance. I think I might maybe differ from one of the panellists in my impression of what that is. I don't think it's yet at least comparable to what we were seeing in the mid to late 90s. I think back then my gran had heard of people like Blair, and she'd heard of people like certainly Tony Blair. Yeah. Nowadays I think there's no sort of figurehead, and there's no sort of person that my gran would have heard of, even Gordon Brown she might not have heard of. So in terms of major mainstream people that everyday people can grasp onto, I don't think the creative renaissance has reached that stage yet. But definitely you walk along the streets and there's an upsurge in street art, and you see all kinds of interesting things going on everywhere. You see street performances left, right and centre, which you weren't seeing 3 or 4 years ago. So my impression from just wandering around the city, which I do a lot of, I get through lots of shoes. From that angle, I think there's definitely a creative renaissance, but I don't think it's quite of the scale we saw in the 90s just yet.
Yeah. And Taryn?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I think there's really been a refocus recently, and we were speaking before just about in the nightlife industry, but it seems like before there might have been members bars, let's say, and then kind of cheap and cheerful, cool pubs or places people were going out, and I think now you're seeing that the middle market is kind of vanishing, and people are trying harder on both ends of the scale to kind of refocus what they're actually doing, and I think that's why it is kind of exciting. On the, let's say, cheap and cheerful end of the scale, you're seeing really interesting club nights coming out, which are, Dream Bags, Jaguar Shoes last week did something for nothing, and they're just saying, we have stuff to give away, come down, check it out, let's keep going out, it doesn't have to be expensive. And where you're seeing lots of new members bars, it is quite an odd year for openings because there have been so many new members bars. Paramount, which is very expensive, the new Ivy Club, Bureau, I mean the list goes on, Molten House. But they all are kind of, instead of just saying we have a membership fee, we're exclusive, we have pricey drinks, it is more about, it seems to be redefining a point, what they're about. Bungalow might be where people can go to dance if you're older and still feel okay.
Why don't you look at me when you
trying to get this direction. And I would also say what I found really interesting about this year is that more than a renaissance, I would say kind of a popularization of, let's say, bistrotech's been hot for ages, cabaret, etc. But you see bistrotech moved with their pop-up restaurant to the Royal Academy of Arts to create Flash. And, the Royal Academy is an institution, and the fact that, pop-up restaurant, Giles Deacon chandelier, it was really a great collaborative effort. And, Johnny Woo doing cabaret upstairs every Monday night. And this, again, you're seeing, and I think we're going to see more and more cabaret. Yes, we've already seen burlesque, but coming into the West End, etc. So I think we're seeing more and more of things that were bubbling east coming west, Mayfair, etc., as well as take Shoreditch House, for example. Nick Jones, Soho House, had generally owned things in the West End. Now, open something in East London. I guess that was last year. But I think we're just seeing a lot more mobility. The barriers are breaking down.
That's interesting. And Justin, how do you feel about this idea of a renaissance?
I think for everyone else, so apologies about that. I think what's so interesting you're saying about this slightly flat period we've come out of. I think for my mind, and certainly in publishing and the events around it, I was discussing Tara in the way that it's possibly symptomatic of this rather inflated bubble we've come out of, and I think it's been a long period where people could go into creative endeavours and not ask the questions that Matt was talking about. And in some ways very fundamental, basic questions saying, well, why are we doing this? What's the point in it? What's the end result we're looking for? And I think we've had this maybe a period of sort of 7-8 years where money was just being sort of pumped into ideas or creative ideas without a great deal of thought about what the intended end result was. People were opening things left, right and centre, and I think it's the theme of today is looking for green shoots and a bit of positivity. This could be the upside of what's unquestionably going to be a very rough time economically, is that there is going to be a lot of Darwinism involved in this. And I think on the one level a lot of things which don't deserve to survive are going to go to the wall, but secondly the people who actually enter into it in the first place are going to have to think a lot more carefully about why they're doing it, because I don't think the quick fiscal returns are going to be there anymore. I think there's definitely a sense that in London at the moment it's sharpening things up at both ends, and certainly in print publishing, which is my area, I think Taryn's point about where the middle market is going to be completely squeezed is absolutely spot on. I think people at the Daily Star are still doing fine at one end of the market. The Economist is still shifting something 1.5 million copies a week worldwide. I mean, Monocle is doing very well from what I understand without a slightly different business model. But there's those two ends of the market seem to be fine. And I think the problem is really going to be what happens in that sort of mid-period, that's just mid-market, that's just been sort of bumbling along for the last 5 or 6 years. And again, going to your original question, I think it probably is too early to talk about a creative renaissance just yet, but I think what's more exciting in a way is that the cards feel very up in the air at the moment. People, we can speculate quite interestingly about where that's going to go, but I think no one knows just yet, and that's a very exciting time to be working in, if a bit simple hands sometimes.
So taking this idea of cards being up in the air, now could you name 3 interesting things which you kind of think are going on in London right now? They could be specific places or spaces, interesting businesses, interesting ideas, just things which are happening which are kind of grabbing your attention right now.
Shall I start again?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna start with a strange one that most people might not have thought about, but we're going to hear a lot about design, going out, bars, those kind of things. But creativity also comes from the flip side, from the scientific world and the technological world. And I don't know if we'll hear much about that today, so I'd like to quickly bang the drum for how great London is for this area. London leads the world. It really is a hub of science and innovation. We have something like 500,000 people, if you take science in its broadest terms, working in science, medicine, technology, engineering. Hell of a lot of creative minds out there. Now, a lot of them are stuck in the lab doing routine science work, but increasingly, with the great universities we have in town, a lot of people doing these scientific things are getting more creative with it and innovating. And over the past few years, money's been constantly pumped into making London a better place to spin out companies in science, to take creative ideas, turn them into a business model and turn them into new products and technologies to help us in the future. Imperial are very good at this, Nesta are very supportive of this kind of activity, UCL as well. But it's also spilling out into the cultural side of things. Now, I think in my opinion, London leads the world in science-art crossovers and engaging the public with science. A lot of people, certainly in the scientific world, moan about the public's lack of understanding of science and all there's all these great issues that are going to affect us over the next few years: genetics revolution, biotechnology, those kind of things. There's a perceived ignorance in the general population about these things, and so there's this need to provide information and entertain at the same time. And London leads that. We have marvellous institutions like the Wellcome Collection, and just along the road there on Euston Road, which, if you haven't been, make sure you go there in the next week or two. It's a fantastic place where art and science meet each other beautifully. It explains the science in artistic ways that anyone can engage with, and explains the art in scientific ways as well. So perfect pairing. I'll also mention the Dana Centre, which is more about debate and discussion, a great place to go and learn about new science and to actually influence the scientists. I know quite a few scientists who heard things from the floor from the general public, and that's made them think twice about the work they're doing and the direction they're taking.
Yeah.
And there are thousands of other places across town. In fact, there are 30 or so museums and galleries to do with science across town, which is little appreciated. And even in the field of medicine, something like 40 or 50% of all clinical trials in Europe are done in this city. So you can see the large number of people creating, innovating, and being technologically minded in town that often gets overlooked. And I've just talked for about 5 minutes now, so can I limit myself to that one idea and I'll talk to other things? So maybe that's on.
And Taryn, you've already kind of like touched upon like, you know, the east
Yes.
going west and kind of like new galleries,
Yes.
pop-up spaces, members bars. Your kind of like e-magazine documents, arts, lifestyle. So at the moment, what 3 kind of things which you guys are really kind of like identifying as standout things that in the capital?
Yeah, I mean, one, just being here today, I hadn't been actually through King's Cross for a
Right,
while,
right,
and
right.
it feels like everything's moving and shaking here. And just in terms of, you hear about neighborhoods, this neighborhood's going to be hot soon, or, this is going to happen, and we were discussing this before. Earlier this morning, I mean, King's Cross really is, you can feel it, excuse me. But just Central St. Martin's about to, trying to see who is going to end up doing that building. I think this is definitely going to be an exciting place.
Right.
Hotels, I would say. I mean, in London, it seemed like, yes, we have amazing boutique hotels. Ferndale is a good chain, but I would say this year so far, we've seen Gordon Ramsay open a hotel/restaurant, the York and Albany. That's really interesting. I think he kind of said it was, 2 fingers up to the Connaught, but it's kind of people doing it their way. I would say Shoreditch House is supposedly opening a hotel soon. And we also have Conran, who just opened his restaurant/bar/about to be a hotel in East London. So I think that's definitely an interesting space to watch. Each of the rooms are going to have a different designer influence.
Yeah.
It's nice to see that we're having some different boutique offerings.
Okay.
And I would say the Double Club, which is another pop-up restaurant, I think is really interesting.
And where's that?
It is in Islington.
Right.
And Murad, who owns Momo and Sketch, kind of more A-list restaurants, has put this together with the Prada Foundation. And it's pop-up restaurant. It's kind of an old pub that's been renovated, also with a chic restaurant on the side. It's Congolese and British menus. And again, I think that there's really a need for kind of an older crowd who still want to go out and not kind of hassle with the hassle that is London about guest lists and this and that. And it really is a one-stop shop. You go there, you have dinner. They serve dinner till 1 in the morning, and I think it was just really filling a need, and then you can dance till 4 if you want. So yeah.
I mean, in London recently, there seems to be a lot of these kind of like pop-up bars,
Yes.
pop-up galleries, pop-up restaurants, and all that type of thing. Do you think that that's something that's symptomatic of London? Like London is quite demand, and they actually design something new, something energetic all the time, or?
Yeah, definitely. I would say though that restaurants still feel very fresh,
Right.
and I think like dining in new locations, being able to negotiate different hours of operation, etc. That is really, it does feel fresh. Whereas pop-up shops, I would say, with an exception, feel a bit staid, except Nowhere, which recently opened at Dover Street Market, which is a bathing ape. I mean, I haven't seen hype like that in a long time. There were people sleeping outside to get their books signed, and but it seemed to be like there was more thought behind that one. It was, a shop that the founders of Bathing Ape had 16 years ago in Tokyo, and they recreated it with limited edition pieces. And yeah, I went down. It was cool.
And Justin, what are you guys at FHM, or you personally kind of like seeing in London right now?
Well, I suspect there's probably not many FHM readers in the room.
Yeah.
But basically, very sort of brief background. I was brought in about a year and a half ago to FHM. It had 4 years of almost continual sales decline, and I was brought in as part of an editorial team who'd previously been on Arena, which was a sort of brother title to the FHM, to overhaul the magazine and sort of turn it around, which we managed to do in about 6 months. So from sort of 4 years continuous decline, the sales went up again. And the thing we sort of took a punt on was that we had this sort of nebulous feeling that there was some kind of desire for more intelligent content, and I think this links to what Matt was saying about science, and weirdly this has been a surprisingly good seller for us in the magazine. So I mean, this month's issue has got a big figure on quantum physics team at Cambridge University. We've done stuff on quantum mechanics and things on like Iran's nuclear program, things which would not sit as kind of typical men's magazine fare. So we took a fairly huge punt on that about a year ago, stripped out. We haven't had a topless woman in the magazine for 18 months now.
Yeah.
And luckily we have very supportive publishers who said okay and trusted us to do that, and it's actually worked. There does generally seem to have been this renaissance in people actually wanting intelligent content, and I think linking in with the sort of economic recession, the idea of an affordable luxury, and if you can give people a magazine which it's something like Shortlist they can just leave on the tube, that's fine if it's a free magazine. If you're expecting people to pay £4, I think you need to work really, really hard for that. And I think the days when people go, well, it's just £5, whatever, has probably gone in publishing, and you need to work very hard and give them enough content for that. And so that's been very encouraging, because the idea that you could just fill something with cheap shots of naked women and it would fly off the shelves. So that era is
Times are changing.
Hopefully coming to an end. But, and sort of tangentially from that, nothing things like Alan Bond's School of Life Institute, I think is absolutely fantastic.
I think they're actually speaking later on.
Oh right, if they're here, then good work lads. And that's fantastic. And the Frontline Club in Paddington, sort of smaller level, has, you can obviously, if you don't know, you can go down, it's an old sort of war reporters club, you go there any night of the week and there'll be something fantastic on. There's great speakers, great guests, previews of films, and just that idea of reconnecting people in a very public space and just on a very simple level just talking about interesting things.
Yeah.
And again, hopefully those things are at a premium again, so it feels like that's in the air as much as actual sort of physical spaces.
And do you think that that's got something to do with like London per se, whether it's kind of the type of people that seem to gravitate to London, or it's to your point as well, Matt, about the scientific area, and that it's got to do with kind of like the educational institutions, and therefore science has played such a kind of like big part. Is there something specific in London that which gives rise to these kind of things?
I think something unique about, or maybe not unique, but very particular to London, is the ease of getting a venue here, like a pub or a room above a bar or something. There's loads of
last night.
Yeah, we were doing just last night. I mean, you go to New York and you try and hire a room for like 50 people just to get together and have a chat, and you have to pay a lot of money. Here, there's 1,000 places across town. You can hire a room completely free of charge above a pub, and I think that's actually an important thing. I think, and increasingly we're seeing everyday people could be into knitting, they could be into, I don't know, haberdashery or science or anything, and they just get together online first of all, form a community online, and then they have a real world meetup, and there's thousands of these things going on around town, and I think it is because we have this special pub culture. I mean, if you go back, I've done science and now I'll move through the curriculum and do a quick history lesson. There's the things like the Stock Exchange and Lloyd's of London, they have their origins in just gentlemen meeting together in a coffee house in central London, and I think that tradition continues to this day, and it's actually booming at the moment. If you look on meetup.com. And
they become like a forum for ideas to
get absolutely. You get like-minded people who would never have met normally. There's what other channel would they have had for finding each other, and I think that's particular to London. I think it's a special place for that kind of interaction.
And Taryn, is there anything specific? So obviously you come from like Canada originally, now you're kind of like fixed in London. Is there anything specific to London and how it's the makeup of it and the infrastructure which gives rise to certain ideas rather than others?
No, I think people are just very open to things here. Everyone wants to be, like one of the reasons we started Urban Junkies was because people like to be in the know, be up to speed on what's happening. And I would say, yeah, I definitely agree that, you know, we're going through a smart period in publishing right now where people are kind of seeing, you know, where they spend their money and how they also want to spend their time. And I think, you know, with the recent elections and things, people are getting back into politics, or, you know, because it was something that, you know, people were talking about, and you wanted to be able to pitch in. But yeah, I think across the board, people are up for, you know, always improving and being part of things here.
I think also one of the things that the things like Taryn's site have done have totally stolen the lead on the old media, in that I think very traditional media forms have had this absolute obsession for the last 5 years with everything has to be aimed and catered towards 18 to 21 year olds. And, you know, very good reasons for that. I mean, demographic, there's a lot of them, they've got a lot of money, yeah, they're far more affluent than they were 10 years ago. And I think there's a very sort of sizable group from maybe sort of 25 up to about 40 who are still culturally engaged, have a lot of money to spend, and feel like they're essentially neglected and treated like a bit of sort of embarrassing albatross by publications and TV channels that they actually keep afloat. And I think, you know, things like, you know, these sort of web-based ideas and science ideas, or even a lot of nightlife now, I think people are realising that there's actually a huge sector that they've essentially been neglecting, who maybe wants things a bit more involved and complicated and hopefully intelligent. So, as that was certainly the case with us as the magazine, is that, you know, our readers go from sort of 18 to 40. But I think it's probably the late 20s and upwards ones that are really engaged with it.
I mean, this is something that you've already touched on, Justin, just in terms of like London moving forward, and how like the publishing world is almost kind of like getting this sense of sobriety kind of like back in, and you see it within the art world, within the current economic climate. A lot of people are starting to kind of like edit the collections that they're exhibiting, and people are also kind of like arguing whether, you know, this audience that we talk about, this kind of like slightly older 25 to 35, which is almost kind of unique to London to some extent, you know, kind of in a relationship, no kids, and there's that kind of like spending power, really, do you know what I mean? Do you, within your own areas, you've already kind of touched upon this, but moving forward within, you know, with what you do you think that the current climate and moving forward, you know, the kind of credit crunch and that type of thing, how do you see things kind of like changing? I mean, you've touched already about the kind of the polarisation between like the luxe and then the kind of like cheaper entertainment side. I mean, you know, from your perspective, Matt, at the Londonist, how do you see things kind of like moving forward in the capital?
You know, I think it'd be, and there has been for the past year or two, an increasing trend for grassroots things happening, rather than a huge gallery or a huge publisher or a huge whatever doing a top-down say on things. I think you see more and more people just clubbing together and making something or doing something. That sort of make a fair spirit that you get in America. And we try and do it on Londonist. We just have a passion for the city, so we write about it, and we don't get paid for doing it. We just love it. And there are many other examples of that. There are Flickr's a good one. You wander through there, you find all kinds of groups to do with London, and people just contributing photographs and discussions about it and being creative. And I think we see more things like that, and more and more intruding on the space that was previously occupied by large organisations. So you might get grassroots galleries springing up and things like that. So yeah, I think bottom up or grassroots endeavours are the way forward.
You know, I just, what we were speaking about before, I really think everyone is kind of refocusing. So you're going to see a refocus in what people are doing, no matter what company you're in. I think you're going to have a more clear line. But then again, I also think a lot of the boundaries are coming down. Like one of the biggest digital agencies this week has kind of said that they are now going to be called a marketing agency, which is, I mean, we have been speaking to digital agencies for ages now saying, you know, we want to do things on and offline. Let's do events, let's do, you know, all different things. And I think now, you know, people are starting to listen, because a huge company like that is also saying, you know, how can we change? How can we shift? And yeah, I think, you know, this isn't science, but technology, I think a lot of companies now are really going to start embracing technology. You know, before you might not have used Skype, or you might not have known how to set up your BlackBerry pin to pin or whatever. And now you can see it's not, it's like, it's cool to be, you know. So,
I still think there's just an enormous amount of work to be done in traditional print titles, between the boundaries between like their web division and their print. And it's still shocking when you go around them, because I work across about 6-7 different titles, and still a number of them where, in a very physical sense, the web team and the print team have absolutely nothing to do with each other. Don't even know what each other's names are, they don't communicate with each other, and and I think a lot of places there's still, I think people like Taryn have it easier in a way when you start an online venture from scratch. No, but if you start an online venture from scratch, then it seems having a value in and of itself, whereas I think there's still a very ingrained mindset that if you have a print title which then has an online side, the online is seen as in some ways being a poor cousin of the print title.
Right.
And until very recently it was still, in terms of ad revenues and ad rates that were given, it was like, well, if you'll book online then we'll give you the print one slightly cheaper, and really I think that whole model is starting to just turn its head because the websites are so much bigger that people really need to start thinking, if you have both, how do you use the web to drive traffic towards your print edition? Because I don't think, print is not going to go out the window, something like that. Neil Stephenson wrote about books where he says, nothing's as good at being a shark as a shark, or, it's a great line about, print technology works very well, but you need to think how you can drive people towards it in a way that even maybe 2 years ago, people were desperately trying to get people to look at the size of the site is now the first point of call, but I think everyone has a lot of work to do. A lot of work to do on that.
I mean, we've touched upon within this discussion about what's going on in London in terms of the actual kind of infrastructure and how it's always had this almost like common house culture of like discussion, that type of thing. And Taryn's touched upon like the kind of like the, almost like the opposition between like the luxe and the cheaper end of the kind of like the nightlife spectrum. You've also kind of like talked about the need for kind of almost like deeper kind of like editorial content. So if you are kind of looking to set up or establish a business or just create a good idea in London today, is there anything that you can kind of like think on that you would want to draw inspiration from, and you actually think there's like a real need? So, for example, where I live in the borough of Tower Hamlets, and it's physically impossible to get your recycling picked up, and it would just be easy if there was like a bucket just put on a wall. I mean, it's it doesn't have to be a happening. It's just that would just be a good idea. I'd love to recycle, but it's just physically impossible.
Yes.
So it's
I'd second that. I'd invest in that business if you could get it working. I don't know really. I think some kind of citywide. I always think about the web for some reason, but some kind of citywide website that everybody and sponsored by local government, so it's tied into proper authorities, which could address problems like that. But it also could act as a forum for communities to discuss their neighbourhood, to discuss creative ideas that they might have had amongst themselves, and then all the other things that go along with it, like recycling events going on in the area, local jobs, all those sort of things. Now, there are sites like this that do exist already, but they're very small startups. They've got no sort of backing from local government. If someone could tie all those pieces together, I think that'd be a valuable resource. And in fact, I saw on the news yesterday, I think the government are trying to get pretty much everybody in the country on broadband by 2012, by fair means or foul. So the technological barrier will start to come down to, and more people will be able to use sites like that. So I think now's the time to start working on that.
Okay. Taryn,
I feel like this is a bit Dragon's Den. I like
no, it's just only scribbling it down, I'm going to run off with it. It's all on camera though, so it's come from you. It's all right.
Great. No, I think in small businesses you barter, and we have been definitely bartering with things for a while, just in terms of we might have a theatre contact who says there's an amazing show, we don't have, the tickets aren't being sold. Can you bring people in, and we exchange things?
Right.
And I do just think right now, where cash is, hard to come by, you look at flowers, walking down Notting Hill, flowers that are going to die in 2 days. You look at hotels that have rooms that are going unsold. And I just think in terms of a bigger market, you see shows that have no one in them, I think that there really could be something on a consumer level, but I'm more interested actually in the B2B level, because I think there are so many things that could be traded. That's it.
Probably picked up that one.
Yeah.
Justin?
Our main sort of boom area of interest in the mains, the business has been just high-end men's fashion, not in a couture sense, just the sort of very expensive end of casual wear, which is absolutely flying at the moment. And I mean, the recent show in Milan menswear shows a couple of weeks ago were incredibly sober. And everything suddenly it wasn't trousers that turned into tables anymore. It was very, very sober black, things that are going to last 3 years. People like everyone knows Oi Polloi in Manchester, the online men's retailer. It's absolutely fantastic. And they seem to have put on her and that, just bringing in these weird little labels from Scandinavia, Russia, all these places. Fantastic stuff. Very expensive, but lasts brilliantly. You know, last 3-4 years it's selling superbly, and that's been a huge growth area in the bag for us. You know, just how well dressed more and more sort of young men are. So,
I need your help just then.
No, but I mean, you raise a good. I mean, like, you know, men's clothing in London, full stop, is there's definitely a gap in the market.
Yeah, I think at the risk of undermining the whole point of the conference, I think that's actually one of the things that the North is knocking us into a cocktail. Certainly in terms of menswear, I think the North is far, far better dressed than London.
Why do you think that is?
It's just a particular, it's more cut off from the sort of diktats of like fashion and the fashion press. And I mean, going back, you've got the whole sort of history of kind of the casual movement, and that's about upscale sort of terrace dressing. And they still just do it far, far better than London.
No,
I mean,
because there is that culture of almost like in the North, you almost kind of get dressed up to go out, whereas especially in East London, you've got to try and look as rubbish as possible. I don't know whether it's to try and deter getting mugged or not.
Very disappointing. But no, certainly we travel around the country quite a lot for the fashion stuff, looking at trends. You go to these places like Edinburgh, Leeds, Glasgow, all these places. The amount of money men spending on their clothes is fantastic, and they're beautifully dressed, and it's nice to see. So we can learn a few things in London.
Right, wicked. Just going to open it up for questions. If anybody's got any ideas that they want to kind of like bounce off the panel, or if, you know, almost like to involve you guys in the panel as well, if you guys have spotted interesting, good ideas coming out of where you live and you'd like to share it with one another, now's your opportunity. Gentleman in the check shirt and the glasses.
Robin Hoff, Biggie Guardian. You mentioned that London's a kind of the hotspot, but we just touched on the north there. Where in the north do you think, or outside of London, the kind of hotspots?
For me, sorry.
The whole panel there.
I shall preface that by saying my only deal with it has been in the fashion sense because of the kind of writing I do. Edinburgh has been fantastic at the moment. Leeds and Manchester are sort of reliably good, and Liverpool particularly as well. But Oi Polloi, Manchester, I'd say they're really sort of spearheading that in terms of stuff they sell.
Yeah. And lady?
Natalie, Arts and Business. I'm just interested to know what the panel think about the Olympics and whether it's going to be the making of London or the undoing of London.
Okay. Matt, do you want to?
Well, I'm personally quite positive about it. I'm the least sporty person you'll ever meet. I've got no interest in the actual event itself, but I love to see redevelopment. And if you ever walked through that site before they started working, there was absolutely nothing there. I mean, something had to be done with it. Money arguments aside, I think having a big focus for a city that goes on for a few years, it can go horribly wrong, but it can be a great thing. I mean, again, going back to history, the Great Exhibition of 1851, the thing that gave us the Natural History Museum, the V&A, the Science Museum, the Royal Albert Hall, all that legacy stuff that we wouldn't have now, all based around one big event. And likewise, the 1951 event on the South Bank gave us the whole of the South Bank. So if we can get it right, and if we can get our legacy venues right, it could be a great thing for London. It could last 100 years. So I'm quite positive about it.
And Taryn, how do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we'll just use this opportunity. I would say, speaking from a fashion point of view, take a Greek designer like Sofia Kokosolaki before the Olympics in Athens. I don't think that many people knew of who she was, and I really hope. I mean, especially fashion in the UK. You know, we complain about London Fashion Week and we aren't getting enough buyers and we're not getting enough international exposure. I mean, this is an amazing opportunity, and I think, just again, speaking from a fashion perspective, I hope we do it. I hope we use this opportunity.
Mixed feelings. I think it'll work fantastically if, again, as Matt was saying, these things work if you have a kind of vision and a sense of ideas. If it's just done with, can this break even in the next 12 months, it'll be dreadful. I think going back to Manchester did very well with the Commonwealth Games, and I know they did a lot of work on that at the time. One of the things that worked fantastically was they had a whole stewarding scheme which involved, I think, thousands of sort of local people, and I think it will work in the sense that you have to give the people that live around there some kind of investment in it. And I'm saying not financial, but they have to have some sort of proper involvement in the scheme. And will it be a new South Bank or the Crystal Palace? I doubt it, frankly. I mean, it would be nice if it was. I suspect it will be like most recent Olympics, where it's been a short-term spike and then you end up with an amazing velodrome that no one uses. And I understand myself. I think Sydney's stadiums are largely filling up with rainwater and sort of lying derelict now, but But it's, I mean, it's, they say that it's a great opportunity to regenerate that whole part of London, which I understand was Livingston's main impetus for going for it. He saw it as the only way of ring fencing a whole load of money for that belt of Hackney. So if that comes out of it, great. But, I suspect it'll be marked by sort of ineptitude and chaos like an awful lot of British social schemes. Fingers crossed.
Okay, so on that note, just like to wind it up to say thank you very much to the panellists, the lovely Taryn from Urban Junkies, Matt from the Londoners, and Justin from FHM.